Hi, it's Elizabeth Willits here from Investing in Women, and we are live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone that is joining us today. And as you're joining, if you could let us know if you can hear us all right, give us a like or an emoji. That would be fabulous. But today I'm delighted because I'm going to be talking to a women's health coach, Kelly Beaumont from Olive Avocado. I'm going to be talking all about how to work with and not against your menstrual cycle for optimal happiness, productivity, performance at work, and performance at home. So I'm really excited to be learning all about our menstrual cycle, because obviously it affects 50% of us. And I think it'd be really interesting as well to hear about how we can support other people that are going through changes as well. So we're going to be talking all about our menstrual cycle today and how we can support ourselves and support others going through any changes during our month and our life, and with women's health coach Kelly Beaumont from Olive Avocado. So thank you everyone for joining. If you let us know any problems with sound, and obviously if you've got any questions as we're going through, just pop them in the comments. But hi Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm excited to be here. It's good.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So before we start, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your business and your motivations for launching your business?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Kelly Beaumont, and I actually work in the corporate world. So I work in learning and development, and then Olive Avocado is a bit of a side hustle. I like calling it a side hustle. It feels like quite funky when I say that. Yeah. So yeah, Olive Avocado is focused on female menstrual health and educating women on what's happening with their cycle, because I think that there's so much unknown. We learn very little as we go through school. We learn as much as our parents share with us. And it just felt to me that there was so much lacking out there, yet it's such a big impact on our day-to-day life. And indirectly, you know, the men that we live with as well. So I think it impacts pretty much.
I was going to be there nodding along to that.
For sure, exactly. So I qualified as a coach over 7 years ago, and for a long time I was waiting to find out what my niche was going to be. And then I thought, well, something that I'm really good at is my menstrual cycle, because it happens to me every single month. So the more that I realized how much that has a bearing on how I think, how I feel, how I act, what I do, the more I wanted to learn about it. And that scientific underpinning for me felt like a really positive place to go with my coaching business. So yeah, that's kind of effectively what happened. I went off on maternity leave, had my daughter, and I just was itching to start something new. So yeah, that's where it kind of came from, really.
Wow, exciting. So what were did you have any personal motivations for wanting to launch the business?
Yeah, I'd say it was like threefold. So the first one is I'd had problems with my menstrual cycle throughout my teenage years, or in inverting commas, problems, because again, a lot of what I experienced was completely normal. I just didn't get the education on it. And I think that in itself is one of the challenges, because we just don't get taught that from day one. Okay. And the second piece was, because I work in corporate, I found that sometimes I was nailing it and I could deal with pushback. And when I was challenged by stakeholders, I felt like I could take it on and handle it. And then other times I was really impacted by it. And there was this one meeting that I left the room and I ended up crying in the toilet, which just felt horrendous. And I just didn't understand what was happening. So that, and then I had a little girl and I wanted to get it right for her, because as much as my mum tried, she didn't know half the stuff that I now know that I can pass on to my daughter. So yeah, those reasons really.
Oh, interesting. So we were having a chat, weren't we, before we did the live, about how I feel I've been really, I'm 36 now, and I'm still so unaware about things. And I was having a big argument. I mean, probably this is normal, but I was having a huge argument with him the other month, and then I was like, I don't recognize. My mom was like, I don't recognize myself. This isn't me. And I felt really bad. And we had an argument in front of the kids. And then my mom was like, she goes, you were like this time last month. Are you due on your period? And I was like, oh yeah. And since learning, thinking about it, and just putting two and two together, you just start giving yourself a bit more grace. And actually, knowing I've got something like my period coming up and giving myself a bit more grace actually has made me a little bit more relaxed in that week leading up to it, just knowing and being that aware, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Trying to be a bit kinder, but also educating the people that live with us as well. Because I'm sure my husband would say I'm like Jekyll and Hyde. And now I'm like, it's the menstrual cycle. And I think yeah, you can use it. I mean, definitely it allows you to also spot when things aren't completely normal, because having really severe PMS potentially can be abnormal as well. So there's just signs that you can look out for. But I think if we have no education, how can we begin to identify what's happening? So I think raising awareness for me is first and foremost.
People saying they were like their poor husbands. They'll all be watching this after and be like,
yeah. Poor us as well, right?
So what happens internally and then externally during a typical, I know I say typical, I know everyone's different, but typical menstrual cycle?
Yeah, we do say typical, don't we? Because I think there's this like written rule somewhere that our cycle length should be bang on 28 days, and any variance outside of that is a problem. And that, again, just simply isn't true. We're all quite different. So our cycle length typically between 26 to 35 days is considered normal. And the average is around about 29 days. So just for those people who are watching this thinking, mine's, you know, on the shorter side or the longer side. So what happens is day one of our cycle is when we start actively menstruating.
Okay, so when you come on your period.
Yeah, exactly. When we come on our period, and it's when we have a significant bleed. So sometimes we have a bit of spotting, but it's when it's significant. That's what constitutes day one.
And is the spot, when I was trying for a baby for a long time, and I used to spot for days before I came on period, and I was like, something's wrong. I never know, but is spotting normal?
Yeah, it is normal. Again, I think this is about tracking it and understanding whether it's consistent, because consistency usually tells us that that's just normal for our body. Whereas if there's variance month after month, that typically is an indication that something might need further investigation.
Yeah.
So day one of our cycle starts, and we, more often than not, we bleed for around between 3 and 5 days. And at that point, our hormone levels are quite low. So there's two key hormones that we talk about in the menstrual cycle, progesterone and estrogen. And in those early days of our cycle, both of them are quite low. So typically what women tend to notice is that energy levels are quite limited at that point. And we don't have much get up and go. For me, it's like, I want to retreat. I always say if I could work from bed, then I absolutely would, particularly on day one. So yeah, and then about day 3, a lot of women tend to notice a bit of an uplift in energy levels, and that's because we're starting to see a rise in estrogen. As we head towards the point of ovulation, and then towards ovulation, we also get a rise in testosterone as well. So many women, again, this is where we start to feel more energized. We feel like we've got a bit more resilience. We feel maybe a bit more like superwoman. And I always refer to it, and anybody who knows my work will know that I refer to estrogen as like the Beyonce hormone, because it makes you like, you know, like, I feel mid, feel good. And then we ovulate, which is a 1-day event, which again, not many people know, which is why falling pregnant can be, you know, challenging. It's not as simple as we think. Although we can fall pregnant, you know, more than 1 day of the month, it isn't as easy as perhaps we're led to believe when we're young. Like, it's constantly like, stop falling pregnant. Like, you
just one time and that's it. You're pregnant.
Yeah, honestly, like that's what you're led to believe. So that when you get older, I think that you feel abnormal when actually there's probably a lot of normality in what you're experiencing. So then once we've ovulated, some women will experience a steady decline in estrogen, whereas for other women, there's a bit of a drop off. So again, this will vary from person to person. And then in the second half of our cycle, progesterone levels.
I mean, I said it's different for different people. Do you feel worse if there's just a sudden drop?
Yeah, you can do, because you've gone from feeling like on top of the world in many instances, and then you kind of drop off a bit of a cliff. And if you go from contrast day to day, you can kind of get out of bed and think, what happened to me in my sleep last night? Whereas if it's more of a kind of steady decline, I've seen that women can kind of deal with that a little bit better in the general kind of scheme of things. And then progesterone is on the rise in the second half of the cycle. Estrogen continues to drop, and then we kind of start our cycles again. So that's very much a whistle stop tour, but hopefully that's quite simple.
Yeah, really good. I mean, I was whenever I come on my period, I never sleep very well. I don't know if it's hot, and I don't know if that's the
yeah, there's many arguments that say that, you know, there's different reasons why you don't sleep well. Some women, it's in the first half of their cycle because they're feeling so energized through the day that they struggle to wind down, whereas other people will notice in the second half of their cycle progesterone can have a damning effect on sleep as well. So again, it varies from person to person.
It's interesting, really interesting. How can we sort of start maybe tracking our cycle? What's the best way for us to track our cycle, start learning what's normal for us, and then we can obviously spot any abnormalities sooner?
Yeah, I mean, tracking in itself, like the majority of women that I speak to don't. They know when they're on the period, they know when they need to pack a tampon or a pad or a cup or whatever. But then outside of that, they have no awareness of when they're ovulating and very little kind of awareness about when they're going to come back on, you know, and start their next cycle. So I think the starting point, Elizabeth, is literally just identifying how long your cycle is and the days of the month. You know, how many days are you on your period? When are you starting to notice shifts in your energy levels? So I think first and foremost, track the days. And then if you can step it up, I always say just one word, just describe how you felt in one word. And the final thing that I would say to start tracking is be consistent with when you're doing it. What I recognized is when I was tracking my cycle first thing on a morning, I would always say lacking in energy. Well, guess what? When I wake up, I don't feel on top of the world. Whereas at the end of the day, I could really reflect on how I'd been throughout the day. So consistency, understand the days of your cycle, and maybe describe it in one word as a starter for 10. And then once you're comfortable, step it up and do journaling and things like that.
We've had Kirsty says she feels tired, rubbish a week before her period, and she cramps more.
Yeah, again, this is something to take note of. I think what's really important to know is in the second half of our cycle, whether pregnancy has occurred or not, our body is cleverly preparing us to go into hibernation state. So our body thinks that we've fallen pregnant. So it's telling you to retreat. Yeah, exactly. So your body is telling you to retreat, to step back, to protect yourself. So it's actually quite clever, but because you haven't fallen pregnant and you just want to get on with life, you can kind of be in that contradictory state as well, where your mind's telling you want to crack on, but your body's thinking, oh, no.
It's like 2 weeks every month as well. Our body's like trick us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is the thing, and I think this is why recognizing that the second half of our cycle, there's other things that we can tap into. So our energy might not be there, but actually our ability to really reflect, our ability to truly analyze what's happening in our lives or work on more detailed tasks for a lot of women is better to do. So I think it's just working with your cycle as opposed to critiquing it or feeling like you're failing, which can be the case for many women.
Okay, and I mean, what about people that are on the pill? Do they have the same hormone changes as people that aren't on the pill?
No, it's not as simple as that. So again, I won't get into a debate on here because I think everybody's on hormonal contraceptive for their own reasons, but there's a lot of women that are on hormonal contraceptive without the awareness as to what's actually happening. The fact that, you know, you're not ovulating every month in itself can create its own challenges because our bodies go through a monthly menstrual cycle, but it also builds up bone strength. It builds up, you know, many different things for us that if we prevent it from happening month after month, there are longer term things to consider. But this is not me saying don't be on the pill, because I get that women are on it for, as I say, for many different reasons. They can still track what's happening because you can still track how you're feeling, but when they're bleeding, it's a withdrawal bleed as opposed to actually menstruating. So it is very different for women that are on hormonal contraceptives. Yeah.
Right. All right, that was interesting. So we talked about this just now, but how, you know, as working women, how can we, or any women really, how can we work with our menstrual cycle to, you know, be the most productive, happy, and work at home, whatever you do? You know, it'd be interesting to know what tasks we should be doing on which day. And how to implement that.
Well, the first thing that I would say is the only way you're going to know your like optimum is if you track and you identify what's true for you. But in the kind of general kind of broader brushstroke of things, at the start of the month when we start our cycles, you want to be thinking about work that isn't kind of too intensive. So if you can at any point in your month, I would say at the start of your cycle, don't book yourself back to back. A lot of the time, I know I'm guilty of it as a woman. It's like, and as a working mum, it's like, right, this. It's like a military operation. Yeah. So I'm really, really quite strict with myself, particularly in the first couple of days, to try not to do that. Just give myself a bit of time in between things. And then as I step out into day 3, 4, I can start planning more social activities. So from there, in the lead up to ovulation, this is where you want to be thinking about like your team meetings, your kind of group strategies, your networking, your LinkedIn lives, whatever else, like where you
actually out with friends as well.
Yeah, exactly. This is it. Yeah, date night or whatever else. All of those things you want to be thinking. It's about the social activities and interaction, collaboration. And then once you've ovulated, as I said, for some women this will look quite different. But definitely in the week before your period, this is where you want to be doing more of the reflective work. It's where I get quite creative, actually. So I do a lot of like the course writing that I do for my programs, or task-based work that's quite repetitive. That's where I kind of conserve that energy for later on in my cycle. And many women that I work with do the same as well.
So it'd be good for like, I'm just thinking for me, like I write blog posts and things like that. That'd be quite good the week before.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So for someone like you, it could work quite well, all of your business building and working with new clients or whatever else in the lead up to ovulation, because also because our testosterone is quite high as well, we're so much more like confident, and bullshit's the wrong word, but our resilience is so much stronger. So if we do get that knockback, we're less likely to take it personally. Whereas in the second half of our cycle, sometimes we can feel a bit wounded, and then that can have a longer term impact on next month. And so, it's just tapping into these things, I think.
Like it. Yeah, interesting. I'm sure, a lot of people, whatever they do, will be able to think about different tasks and things that they can apply. So, so what happens? We talked a bit just before we went live, didn't we, about, I'm 36 now. We talked a bit about what happens pre-menopause and then during menopause and what we can expect. And that'd be interesting to learn that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work recently around menopause, and I think that it's just amazing that we've started to actually notice that this is a significant change for women. What I haven't seen as much of is the years in the lead up to menopause, which for many women can be where more noticeable change takes place. So what can happen from around the age of 36, interestingly, is we can start to see a bit of a change in our cycles, either that they get kind of shorter and closer together, or that they can kind of go the other way, get longer and further apart, usually the former. And the reason for that is our progesterone is starting to decline generally in our cycles across everything. And our estrogen is on a bit of a roller coaster. And it's referred to a lot of the times as second puberty, because it's quite similar to what happens to us when we first start our menstrual cycle and estrogen is figuring its thing out. So between kind of the ages of 36 and 46, and again, this varies from women to women, we will start to notice those things, but also we might notice a step up in our PMS. We might notice
not my husband.
Exactly. Changes with memory loss. And it sounds quite dramatic, but I just want to be really transparent. The hot flashes, the heart palpitations, and all of this is because your hormone levels are changing. In the lead up to menopause, and it's known as perimenopause in those years. And then menopause itself is a one-day event, which again, many people don't know. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did not know that. I thought it was like,
of course.
Like a light.
Yeah, I know, right? It's crazy. No, so Menopause is a one-day event because all it does is it marks 1 year after your last menstrual cycle. So before that, perimenopause, then menopause, and then you're in post-menopause. So it's just the terminology.
You might be like 6 months thinking I haven't had a period for 6 months, and then maybe you'll come on, or maybe you won't. You know.
You're in the menopause waiting room. That's what we refer to it as. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing that I would say is, and I won't go into too much detail here, but there are so many things that you can do in your day-to-day life to support your experiences of things like perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
A lot, there are alternatives out there. You can look at kind of hormone replacement therapy and things like that, or women who balance their stress levels, stop saying yes to everything, stop people pleasing, start setting boundaries, all of these things that we have autonomy over. If we can start to step them up, actually really support our experiences of things like perimenopause, which I think is really critical.
You get tired on this. Do you lose energy and things during that? It's such a big change. I'm wondering if that's...
Yeah, it's that. And just our hormonal resilience begins to deplete as we get older. So the way in which we can, go from thing to thing in our 20s, unfortunately, just isn't as possible as we get older. Our bodies are basically saying, stop doing everything for everybody else and start prioritizing you. So it's quite clever. Again, it's your body telling you to prioritize, but it can feel like quite a shift for many women. So again, awareness is key.
Okay, so you can obviously take HRT, I guess, and if you wanted to do that, that would be something you discuss with your doctor. Is there any other natural alternatives that women take?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of women who have negative thoughts around HRT, but I think it's come a long way. The reading that I've done and the work that I've done tells us that HRT has been on a significant journey, and many women now are less resistant to take it. I think Davina McCall did a program, didn't she? And I think for many women, I didn't watch it, but many women were like, oh my God, I'm dreading this time of life. And that just shouldn't be the case. So yeah, you can take things like that, or you can look at like progesterone only creams and things like that instead of taking actual medication. But the tricky part is knowing what's happening for you and your hormone levels. So you might want to do testing. There's like certain tests that you can take, because sometimes bloods aren't completely reliable. So I think, again, it's just having an understanding of what's happening for your hormone levels and working with them that way.
And then obviously post-menopause, what expect during that phase?
Yeah, again, this is different from person to person. Women that I've worked with have had many different experiences. What's important to know is that post-menopause, whilst your hormones have essentially gone in essence, you're back to being more balanced. So where you notice that inconsistency in your hormone levels before menopause, the confidence that you can take is that your hormone levels do become more balanced after that time. Some women stay on hormone replacement therapy, but other women choose or feel that they don't need that anymore. So again, it's just varied from person to person. And what I say to many women is, or what I see with many women is, after menopause, they almost get this like, this kind of like, I don't care anymore. Like I'm about me now. So it's almost like they've gone through that entire process. And at the other end of that turbulent journey, women really find themselves again. And it's almost like you get this second wind as women. So we go through all the tough stuff in these years, but actually we find that we come out the other side, and for many women, they can feel like this renewed sense of life, which I think, again, just is something to really look forward to throughout all of this.
I mean, I know we're on LinkedIn, but so what happens to women? I shouldn't maybe ask this on LinkedIn, but what happens to women's sex drives during menopause and post-menopause and dryness and hormones?
It's really tricky to say one size fits all. I think something to recognize is that women's sex drive looks very different generally month to month anyway. So where men are quite that they're given quite a lot of testosterone, for women it happens around the point of ovulation, because our body is telling us that that's the best time to conceive. So our body's like, yeah, come on, we're ready to go. We you know, and we want to do that kind of stuff. Whereas at other points in the month, I don't know about you, but I'm like, put the kettle on. I just want to wind down tonight.
Like that. So I think it has to be at certain points in the month where you
Exactly. And again, you know, it because our hormone levels deplete later in life, for many women, they can experience a drop in sex drive. But again, I think it's just tapping into how you're feeling and having those conversations with your partner, and deciding whether you want to take any hormone replacement therapy to handle that, or whether it's something that you can handle naturally. Naturally, again, in inverted commas, because that would suggest that HRT isn't natural, and I don't think that's the right connotations, because it can be natural if you get bioidentical hormones and things like that. So
okay, and so I mean, we talked about like us. Obviously, a lot of women are going through menopause, and at the same time supporting their teenage daughters that might be going through puberty.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So if we're supporting our teenage daughters going through puberty, what happens just you know, as you're going through puberty, and how can we support?
Yeah. The first thing that I would say before we say about what happens during puberty is, as a parent, the earlier you can start having conversations around what's inevitably going to happen, the better. And I'm talking like 5, 6, if you can start to have conversations as much as you feel that you can in a way that feels safe, you start to normalize the conversation. It's like the conversation around other things that we want our teenage children to know about. If we have one big conversation, it's overwhelming and it makes you want to retreat. Whereas if it's a constant dialogue, it becomes less of a taboo, doesn't it? So that's the first thing that I would say, like, open the conversation up, because if you don't, somebody else in the schoolyard is going to.
That's like my kids. If anyone else has got kids, like they follow me into the bathroom, and then you know, they say, "What are you wearing?" They say, "What are you wearing a nappy for?" You know. But I suppose, you know, as they get a bit older, you.
Yeah, my daughter plays with tampons as little drumsticks, and I think, is that good parenting? And I kind of just think, whatever makes me survive through the day, like, whatever gets me. Yeah. So definitely that, and then I think continuing with that so that they know when to expect their menstrual cycle and getting them prepared for that, you know, so that if they are caught out at school, they have stuff with them if they need to, because there's nothing worse than,
I mean, you know, thinking about, it's a bit like you said, you know, it just happens, doesn't it? And you're like, oh gosh.
It does. And there are things that you can look out for. But definitely when I started my periods, I was like, what's going on? Like, what's happened? So yeah, making them aware of what's to come. And then when they do start their menstrual cycles, as we were saying before about perimenopause, their hormones are kind of figuring themselves out. Mm-hmm. So what they might notice is a really heavy flow, which is something that was true for me. Their complexion is quite spotty, they might have cramping. So a lot of these things that we're led to believe we need to remedy. So I was put on the hormonal contraceptive at 13 because I have had a heavy menstrual cycle. I now realize that was completely normal, and the hormonal contraceptive wasn't required. So if I could just
figuring it out, okay, that makes sense. That does make sense.
And unless we give our body time to figure it out, we're kind of putting a band-aid over something that doesn't need fixing.
Like learning to walk, isn't it? When you first start, you see your kids learn to walk, and they're stumbling all over the shop. And great comparison. It's so true. Like, give your body time to work out what's happening, because it's huge. It's a change that it's going through. So let it be. But yeah, in those early stages, your daughter will be having inconsistent cycles. She might be having anovulatory cycles, which means that she isn't ovulating all of the time, which means that's why sometimes there can be variation in length. She will start having cramping. She will have PMS and be quite grumpy from time to time. But guess what? All of this is normal. So again, if we can educate ourselves, we can then support our children through these things, that they shouldn't feel, you know, that they're failing. I always say this: they're not failing, or something isn't wrong. They're not broken. It's just they're maturing into the next stage of their lives. Okay, brilliant advice. And do you know what I wanted to ask you as well? In an ideal world, how would you like to see employers supporting their female employees?
Oh my gosh!
Obviously, we have
that.
What do you hear about period leave, don't you, in certain countries? menopause leave in some organisations.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that in itself would be amazing if we could acknowledge that. But I think before we even go there, it goes back to the awareness piece again. The thing that I refer back to, I did a piece in a parenting newsletter around how when I became a mum, I finally realised what all the other mums were going through at work.
Yeah,
And
you just don't get it, do you?
you don't get it. And I was a people leader, and I supported many women who were returning from maternity leave. But in hindsight, I look back and think, how much support was I giving them? Because I couldn't empathise. I didn't get it. I didn't understand you needed to be a mum all the way up until you started work. And as soon as you finished work, you went back to being a mum again. I didn't get it, right? So then I apply that logic to what we're talking about today. And I think, how can people support people if they don't understand what is happening?
Yeah.
The stuff that we've spoken about today, women themselves don't know about. So first of all, we need to educate women so that they know what's happening for themselves on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And then we need to educate leaders who are supporting these women so that if they're not on their A game, whatever that is,
yeah,
there might be some reasons as to why. So let's open the conversation up so that we can be transparent about how we're feeling. We've gotten to a really good place with things like mental health. So I would love to see those strides happen for women's health as well, because it's so underfunded, it's so under-resourced, and it's so under-supported, and it just makes it more challenging for women. And we have a long way to go, but education is key. That's what I believe we need to do first. And if we can get to a place where we offer period leave and menopause leave, then amazing. But let's actually start talking about it first, because half people just won't have this conversation, and that in itself is a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, well, I've learned loads during this. I feel like really informed. So thank you. So how can people find out a bit more about what sort of services you offer and how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is olive-avocado.com, and I'm on Instagram at Olive Avocado Coaching. So they're the best places really to find me.
And do you just offer coaching to women that are going through some?
Yeah, so you can do one-to-one coaching, or there are training programs that I run. I'm also doing corporate presentations. So exactly what we've just speaking about, actually going in and speaking to employers or big, webinars and things like that, just to raise awareness on what's happening. So coaching, training courses, and then presentations as well.
Brilliant. All right, perfect. So I will link to all those for people. And obviously, if anyone's got any questions, I've had a few comments as we've been going through. But if anyone's got any questions, then I'm sure that they can get in touch with you. I've linked to you if people are watching this on LinkedIn, and I'll link to your websites. And if anyone's got any questions, they can get in touch.
Perfect.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.
Bye.